Exodus 35:10 through 19 in the Christian Standard Bible say, "Let all the skilled artisans among you come and make everything that the Lord has commanded. The tabernacle, its tents and covering, its clasps and supports, its crossbars, its pillars and bases, the ark with its poles, the mercy seat, and the curtain for the screen, the table with its poles, all its utensils, and the bread of the presence, the lampstand for light with its utensils and lamps, as well as the oil for the light, the altar of incense with its poles, the anointing oil and the fragrant incense, the entryway screen for the entrance to the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering with its bronze grate, its poles, and all its utensils, the basin with its stand, the hangings of the courtyard, its posts and bases, and the screen for the gate of the courtyard, the tent pegs for the tabernacle and the tent pegs for the courtyard, along with their ropes, and the specially woven garments for ministering in the sanctuary, the holy garments for the priest Aaron, and the garments for his sons to serve as priests." Here, Moses is having the children of Israel prepare the tabernacle in the way God commanded. We see everyone working together for crafts, tailoring robes, and decorating the worship area. Even though we're no longer under the law of Moses, as Christians, we believe aesthetics can play an important part of worship. Father Jonathan Resmini, why do you believe God had the people of Israel put so much into the decor of their worship area, and what can today's church learn from that?
Well, I think there is something to be said about as we understand God as, of course, He's the good, the loving, but He's also beauty itself. And so by adorning our sacred spaces, spaces that we set aside for worship of our God, who is the beautiful, we are offering a reflection of that divine beauty and allowing our senses, in this case, our visual sense, to be open so that perhaps in seeing with our physical eyes, we will begin to see with our spiritual eyes the divine majesty which is being reflected through those beautiful things.
Hmm. Hmm. Hey guys, welcome to the Whole Church Podcast, possibly your favorite church unity podcast. I'm Joshua Noel. I am one of your hosts, here with the greatest co-host to ever co-host. When God gave man breath, He really did it to make sure that there was something to fuel the one and only TJ, Tiberius Juan Blackwell. How's it going, TJ?
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Also here with fantastic return guest, one of my favorites and yours. He has become the I forget what the term is, but he's now over the parish here in Charlotte's Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church. The one and only Father Jonathan. Father Jonathan, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I think the title they gave me now is Dean of the Cathedral.
Dean of the Cathedral. That sounds so cool.
Proistamenos in Greek, which just means the presiding priest. So
Ooh.
Now I am
also cool
in charge, for better or for worse, for these people.
Yeah. We've learned it's a lot of work. Yeah. I like to keep Father Jonathan's one of those guests where sometimes I just like to keep up with him. I'm like, it's just good to hear and see how he's doing and hear from him. Which is why I like doing these series, because we hear from a lot of those guests that we just like talking to. And it's going to be a fun episode. Today we're going to be continuing our ecumenical aesthetic series. We are doing this series talking about how art's used in various different churches, because we believe that beauty and art can bring us all closer to God and closer to one another. And it's also one of those things that the church is wildly different in from one denomination to another. And I think understanding our differences can help us understand each other and come together a little bit better. So that's what we're here for. We're going to talk about the Orthodox Church and its relationship with the arts and using art in worship.
Yeah, and check out the Anazon Ministry Podcast Network. The link is below. You can check out other shows like ours, shows that we work with, shows that we're friends with, just your good Christian or Christian adjacent content for y'all. And consider supporting us by buying the merch. Link is in the show notes. And it's just cool to, support your stuff out in public, because other clothes don't really matter at all,
Yeah, that's pretty true. But also, as we all know, I have a favorite form of unity that we start our show off with, which is silliness. So I start this off with a silly question. We've done this before, Father Jonathan, and we'll answer first, give you time to think about it. This is a really specific one. What kind of art do you think Larry the Cucumber would most likely connect with? TJ, do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by what kind of art?
I was intentionally vague, just to see what you do with it.
Oh, well, I came up with two answers.
Me too.
Cool. So I think Larry connects the most easily with music, naturally.
Okay.
We know he does that. That's canon. And
All
I
right.
think as far as other art goes, I really think the painting he would associate himself closest with is when he gets in one of those moods where he's like, oh, why doesn't anybody like me doing stuff without me? It's probably like The Fallen Angel by like Alexandra Cabanel.
Man.
Good painting. It's literally Lucifer after being cast out of heaven.
Man.
He would be in one of those moods.
I am. See, this is rough because I was going to answer mine kind of based on how you answered yours to see how we're going to go with this question. Because you could have, if you did like an art type proper, I might have actually said pixelization because he doesn't have hands. Makes sense that he'd connect with that. I think personality wise, man, it's so hard. Also, you could just say superhero movies. Obviously, he connects with that. But I'm gonna go with interactive art. Like, you know how that you have those art exhibits that like show you a reflection of yourself, or they like move with you or something. I think Larry is one of those where he needs to be able to interact with the piece. That's where I'm going. Father Jonathan, what kind of art do you think Larry the Cucumber is relating to?
I don't know who Larry the Cucumber is, so this is a hard question.
Oh man,
I think you've got it.
that's fair.
I think you.
How do you describe Larry?
He's a cucumber from VeggieTales.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like intelligent Patrick the Star. Like if you get Patrick intelligence, I feel like you end up with Larry.
I don't know, maybe abstract art.
That's fair. I get that.
It.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. Yeah. All right.
No.
So he's from VeggieTales. I think I heard that. I don't think I've ever watched VeggieTales. So
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. He's one half of the VeggieTales duo.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. Phil Vischer voices the tomato. I forget who does Larry. Or I have that backwards. I think that's true. Yeah. Oh. Anyway.
So one of the main reasons we're doing this series is because of our belief that beauty can bring people closer to God and to one another. And I feel like that's something the Greek Orthodox Church really gets, because I've never seen a Greek Orthodox sanctuary that wasn't gorgeous. But we have a few questions we're asking everyone in the series to go along with that belief. So could you tell us of a time where you've seen God in the beauty of creation outside?
So it's not a specific time, but it's a specific location, actually two locations. So I'm originally from Boston, or just outside of Boston, and I make my way up by car at least once or twice a year. And there's a spot like right on the Virginia border, because I always cut through the interior, and it overlooks this kind of elevated mountain that you're kind of driving up, but you get a clear shot only when I'm leaving Charlotte, looking out, where I can see off for miles and miles and miles of this just open space, and seeing houses and cities and towns. But because I can see so far, I can see the way in which they are placed within the context of the natural world. And I can always see clouds and the sky, and I'm usually leaving early enough in the morning where it's just a bright sky overlooking this whole creation where humanity has, placed itself within the beauty of nature. And And then the other spot is another highway spot. And I used to drive up to a summer camp in New Hampshire. I would go there over the summer, and so I'd be driving back and forth on my days off, so that I could like do laundry and stuff. But it was always on the way back. There was again this spot, and I could only see it on my way up because of the tree line driving back down. But there was this, it couldn't have been more than 20 seconds of wide open space overlooking mountain peaks. And in the wintertime, when I would drive, you could also see the ski resorts and the ways in which humanity kind of cut its way through that natural world, but could not really overcome it. And I think in both of those instances, I was just reminded of the vastness of God, and and there's something beautiful and awful, like I was filled with awe at that, at just the expanse of that. and and I think it's, you can only see it when you have the largest perspective possible, I think. Kind of like when you look off into the sky in the night and you can see the stars when you're like outside of the city and just see that vastness, and there's something that makes you feel small but yet embraced at the same time. And I find that to be a beautiful experience of an encounter with God in the natural world.
Yeah, that is absolutely one of my favorite things to see is just how humanity has integrated itself into the world. And a lot of people just don't get it. They're like, humans destroying the planet. Like, yeah, that is true, but it's amazing to see, like, well, we can't live here. We're going to change here because we want to stay here.
Yeah. I think it's the difference of like, this is like a random, weird kind of a pet peeve of mine, of like modern day road construction, which go straight through the mountain. Whereas some of those older roads that I find really beautiful find a way to make the road kind of work with the mountain. And I think when we see our construction, like our creation working with God's creation, that's really a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah. So, would you share a moment with us, if you have one, where you felt a special connection to a painting, sculpture, or another art piece? It doesn't have to be religious. It just,
Yeah, in this case, it will be. So when I was in I think my sophomore year of college, uh, I was very sick, and it turns out that I had a terrible case of appendicitis, but didn't realize it. And I waited so long, thinking that it was like food poisoning or something like that, that my appendix actually burst, and I ended up in the hospital
Oh,
for emergency surgery. And it was so far gone, and I had peritonitis in my abdomen, and it was a long surgery, a long recovery process. My digestive system shut down, um, and then towards the end of 2 weeks, they began to be worried that they might have to give me a feeding tube and like a colostomy bag. Thank God I didn't have to have that happen. But I just kind of had this moment of breaking down, and I had this icon in my dorm room of Christ of Sinai, and it's an icon that's one of the oldest in existence. It's pre-iconoclasm, so before there was a period of time in church history when icons were being destroyed, and it's one of the oldest remaining. And you can find the original on Sinai at the monastery of Saint Catherine on Mount Sinai, and so I have a replica of that. And I remember after I began to pray after I got that news, and some seminarians came in and were praying with me, and I asked my brother to get that icon. So he went all the way to my dorm room, and like half hour, 45 minutes away, and brought it there. And I just remember standing there and sitting there in bed, not having been able to move much, being in tremendous pain, and just looking at Christ's face. And there's the beautiful thing about this icon is the way it's painted. It's almost like there are two sides to it, and the two sides represent like judgment and mercy. And one is a sterner look, and one is a more gentle look. And for whatever reason, the only thing I could see was that gentleness. And I spent the whole night in prayer when the sun went down till the sun came up. And I went from the day before them telling me I may never eat again on my own, and I may need surgeries throughout my life, to everything turning back on. And I went home that day. I didn't eat for 2 weeks, and I had 3 breakfasts that morning. So so I had this encounter, and I was inspired to pray, and the icon became a tool in prayer, and kept me captivated in a way that allowed me, without ceasing, to pray for whatever God's will was for me, to give me strength if that was what was going to happen with the doctor's beard, but also for healing should that be His will as well. And thank God that was His will. And I do have complications from that illness still, but thank God I've been able to live a relatively normal life since then.
Yeah, man. If this was just a Pentecostal podcast, we would have saved that for last and then had an altar call. That's pretty good. Yeah. So there's been, I don't know how to follow that up. There have been a lot of studies that showed, which I guess this is really relates to what you were talking about, that there's a healing aspect to seeing beauty. I know for your case, it's more than just beauty in that story you were talking about, but do you believe there's a reason that God might have wired humans that way, where like perceiving beauty or hearing beauty can actually have a healing aspect to it?
I think I was in the intro. I was mentioning that that God is the beautiful. That's one of the ways we use to describe Him. Of course, God is love. God is the merciful one. God is the good, kind of as these like ideals. And so I think because we, being made in the image and according to the likeness of God, bear the capacity to receive those things. And I think when we encounter the beautiful and we encounter God, who is the beautiful, there's a synergy that happens, and we come to a fuller, um, a, a, a fuller sense of self. We are more in tune with ourselves as we are meant to be. And I think there is something inherently healing about that, because it's an encounter with God. And we are coming to that. We're coming to our Creator, which is somehow both our beginning and our end. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He is the source of everything, but he's also that towards which we're all tending. We're heading to Him, and we find our end, our telos, in Him. And so I think that encounter with the beautiful has the capacity to bring about healing, because it's a return to that source that is also our goal. So,
Yeah. Fantastic answer. Big fan of that. So before we get to the more unique aspects of the episode, we have a segment we've been doing each time for the Ecumenical Aesthetic series, and we call it the Artist Corner. So I have a few questions to pick from. I do it just in a random order. If we get to them all, great. If not, it's not a big deal. We have 7 minutes to talk about whatever we want here. I'd like to try to do them all, but if it's not happening, it's not happening. So, are you ready?
yes.
Awesome. So, do you prefer hymns or modern worship music?
In liturgical settings, hymns, I do find there's beauty, and I can have divine experiences in contemporary worship. But the historic hymns are that's what worship is like to me. That when I think of worship, it's those historic hymns sung in Greek or in English, or if I'm in another country or another community, in whatever native language I find myself in. But those are what worship sound like to me.
Yeah. So, does your church have a flag? And if so, what do you know about it?
A flag, like a standard type thing,
Yeah.
not specifically. You might find in certain churches, maybe in the old country, you might find a Byzantine flag, which is like a yellow flag with like a double-headed eagle, like the symbol of the Byzantine Empire, just because of our historic connection to Byzantium. In the U.S., you might find the flag of the nation state from which that church has its origin. So on our site, we have a Greek flag for that, but then also, of course, an American flag. We don't place them prominently within the church. These are like at our courtyard, but they are present at certain times, and we do celebrate, national holidays of the old country, along with the national holidays of our our new home in the United States. But they're often coupled with worship, and some of them are connected with religious feasts as well. So,
So, what is the most unique piece of art that you've ever seen or heard?
hmm, that's a good question.
It's a hard question, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's unique, but I'm reminded. So there's this monastery mountain in Greece called Mount Athos. There's like 20 monasteries there, and one summer I happened to be there for a big feast day, like the celebration of the patron saint of that particular monastery, which is over 1,000 years old. And they were doing an all night vigil, and that vigil lasted like 17 hours. So it was like, when we say all night, it was all night and then into the next day. And at the beginning of the Vespers service, which is the evening service, but also like the first service of the day following the Jewish practice of the day starting in the evening of the night before, we chant a section of Psalm 104. And it's called the Anixandaria because of the line from the psalm, and it was 2 hours long for just like half of the song. And it was like, I wasn't sure if I was in heaven or on earth at that moment, because it was just so beautiful and ethereal, and we were all together, and the whole community was just entranced and focused on God in that moment. And it's not any more unique than any other hymn, but I think the whole context of how it was chanted and what we were doing it for just made it all the more profound.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Does your church have any statues that we could discuss?
We do not have a tradition of statues in the Orthodox Church.
Cool. So, does your church have stained glass? And if so, what's on it?
So it's not a normal artistic expression for Orthodoxy to have stained glass. But here at the cathedral in Charlotte, we do have stained glass. Some of it is just colored glass, and people ask about its significance, and I say I think they just wanted pretty colors to shine through. But then there's also some icons of different saints. I think like Saint John the Baptist is on one. On one side, it's male saints, and on the other side, it's female saints. And they just kind of take the place. They're like in line with also a series of icons as well. So it's icons and then the stained glass with icons on them all in a row. But it's not a usual practice in Orthodoxy to have them.
So,
Good enough.
what kind of wall decor is around your church, and what is its significance? Your church is kind of large, so you don't have to say it all.
Yeah. So essentially, in Orthodox churches, you'll especially ones that have been around for a while, you'll start to see them just covered in almost every inch with some type of iconography, uh, uh, saints and scenes from the life of Christ. Um, and then there'll be like designs and patterns kind of tying those icons together. And the significance historically is, there was the church also grew up in a time when not everyone was literate, so there is an educational aspect to it. So an icon of the life of Christ will show a scene like the nativity, like Christ's birth, but it'll give every every part of the story. You'll see the Magi in it. You'll see the shepherds in the field. You'll see Christ in swaddling clothes. You'll see the ox and the donkey that are alluded to in the prophets. You'll see the manger and the cave. You'll see the Virgin Mary. You'll see Joseph. So you'll see like the whole story in a single icon as a means of communicating something. Or an icon of a saint will, even if you can't read the name of the saint, you'll kind of get a sense of their story, because there'll be features like if they're holding a cross, it means that they were a martyr for the faith. Or if they have a big forehead with just a little patch of hair, it means that they were wise, because they're not depicting the person as they existed historically. They're depicting them as they relate to God and kind of in the heavenly spaces. So it's educational, and they're also tools to direct our attention to God.
No,
That's
awesome.
man.
That was
That's actually
exactly 7
fascinating.
minutes. That was exactly 7
Yeah.
minutes.
That's crazy, but also fascinating about like they're not depicting people how they look, but rather just how they were, like the cross meaning martyrdom. I never knew that. I just knew some of them got to hold a cross, you know?
Yeah, it's really beautiful because we have like photographs, because they're contemporary saints that lived in our lifetime, and and when we make an icon of them, they don't necessarily not look like they looked when they were alive, because we have photos of them. But that's not what's given priority. We don't try to like photo replicate them. They fall into like standard patterns, and for like there's like a language to the icons, like the way that they're supposed to look and the features that they're supposed to have. So it's not just an artistic expression. It's a language of communicating theology.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah, the Greek Orthodoxy always seemed like the maximalist like denomination to
Yeah.
me. So you walk into a Greek Orthodox church and there's stuff to look at.
That reminds me. There was
Everything
this
means something.
movie that came out a few years ago, like the 5 Year Engagement. With Emily Blunt was in it, and the guy from I think it was from How I Met Your Mother. I forget Marshall's
Neil
character.
Patrick Harris?
Jason
Oh
Segel.
no. Yeah.
And so they're at the
Marshall.
very end, they finally we're gonna get married, and so they're like, what type of service do you want? And they go through, it's like Christian, and then it turns to a guy that's clearly Orthodox, extreme Christian.
Yeah. Extreme Christian. I like that term. I think you guys should just claim it, you know? The extreme Christians.
No, just don't switch it around.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. So this is technically a follow-up question, but I wasn't told I can't do that. So your church doesn't do statues. Do y'all do like carvings in the walls ever though? Is that
There
different?
are some reliefs. The people listening won't be able to see it, but there's like a little cross here that I wear,
Yeah.
and inside of it, it's slightly carved, but there's rules about it. I think the protocols that we have are like it can't be more than like 1/3 or something like that exposed. Like it can't
Yeah.
be like a fuller carve than a certain percentage or something like that.
That
But
makes
we do
sense.
reliefs, but they're not like a normal feature in every church.
Wow.
Yeah. Good to know.
Cool. So like
Good to know.
bas reliefs, but only this deep.
Yeah,
Further than that, and it's too close to a sculpture.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. So, Father Jonathan, a lot of our listeners, they're more from the evangelical Protestant traditions a lot of the time. You know, we do have some Catholic listeners and stuff too, and I assume some Orthodox listeners. It's hard to get that kind of detail. It's easy to get like age, gender. I don't know why it's so hard to find out people's religion. Anyway, yeah, your tradition is more comfortable with the arts being involved in your worship areas than some of our evangelical counterparts. Do you think this difference in worship contributes to why some people are uncomfortable attempting some like ecumenical service kind of stuff?
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, the reality with like any ecumenical dialogue is we have to be willing to receive people as they are. And if that's the biggest challenge that I've seen is there is there can be people can view it as like second commandment violations and therefore question our Christianity, which is it's hard to receive another when they may not be able to even acknowledge the Christian faith that we have um, because of their conceptions of what a second commandment violation is, or their conception of what it is we do with icons and how we utilize them as tools in worship, but you know, not understanding, you know, what those ways are, and then also not giving us the grace to know, like, we've had the same scriptures as they have, and I mean historically for longer, only if you think that the Orthodox Church has its origins in the early church, and so it's not something that we haven't wrestled with. Like we've had to question, like, how is this not in violation of like this the second commandment, to not establish or not to have any graven images. And part of it is just our understanding of what idolatry was historically versus what it is that we do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't think I've ever had someone not want to come in, and I think we're pretty welcoming when people do come. I know Josh,
Yeah.
you've come at least once, not twice,
Yeah.
to the worship services.
Fun time.
And so it can be, but again, it's not an essential aspect. Like, I mean, I don't need a church space that's adorned with all of those icons in order to engage in worship. And I think sharing ecumenical space for prayer can happen in a lot of different ways.
Okay, so how would you describe to people who aren't used to art in their place of worship why your church believes that you should have them?
Yeah, I think so. Part of it comes again to the theology that emerged during the iconoclastic period will really be helpful. So that there's a period of time when there was a deep concern about the use of icons and in Orthodox in churches. And this is not Orthodox in the denominational sense, because it was even pre-schism from the West and the East. Um, but the idea was that if God became incarnate, it means that material reality has the capacity to bear God in a way where things can be sanctified and they can communicate God's grace. And so the reason that we have art is because we find them to be useful in worship and teaching. And because God became incarnate and Christ is the express image of the Father, therefore we have the capacity to image him. We can do a depiction. And again, it's not a historical, not like a reproduction of his actual look. It's a means of communicating theology for people to see. And one of the things it's communicating is we believe in a God that was incarnate, a God who is outside of time and space, the creator of all things, who is the uncreated, freely chose to enter into his creation and take on humanity and begin to live humanly for our salvation, and therefore sanctifying material reality. And so material reality has the capacity to bear God and bear God's grace and communicate God's grace. And so we don't see there to be any difficulty in utilizing that reality. As I said before, it's an opportunity for us with our physical eyes to be stimulated through what we see. In the same way sounds can stimulate our ears, or we use incense in our worship that give us like touch our sense of smell. The idea will be that by our physical senses being utilized, perhaps our spiritual senses will be open, and we'll begin to see how God is acting in the midst of the world at all times, because he's everywhere present and filling all things.
Yeah. I talked about in an earlier episode, the Celtic Trinity knot is one icon for me, and it's almost like when I think of the Trinity, I don't think in words as much as I think in that photo. because I can't in words describe three things that are separate but also one thing. Like it just doesn't.
Yeah.
To me, those words are contradictory. But if I think in that image, it's almost like it just makes more sense.
Yeah.
Is that similar to what you when you use these photos to depict more of a theological idea as opposed to what people literally look at? Is that a similar kind of
Yeah.
concept?
Yeah, potentially. It's also like we see them as like windows into heaven, where somehow like the image communicates the personal energies of the one depicted, but where it's not, we don't believe that, like, say the icon is the saint or that Christ is the icon or anything like that. That would like lead us into like very quickly into idolatry. But
Mhm. Yeah.
the way I like to look at it, and we have contemporary examples outside of Christian practice, outside of worship practice, and I always say to people, it's kind of like when someone passes or you miss someone who's at a distance and you have a photograph of them, you might like talk to the photograph, you might kiss the photograph, like, I don't think that my loved one, my grandmother, let's say, who passed away, is the photograph. But somehow the kiss that I give to her cheek in the photograph is somehow communicated to her, who is alive in Christ, because she died in Christ. And it's the same thing with the saints. And so it is a means by which we can enter into the heavenly spaces. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. Like a lot of people keep something that like smells like a loved one, or for me, and I think this is probably pretty common, recreate a dish that someone who passed on before used to make because it's like something about just that engaging your senses. It's almost like they're there, but they're not there, but it's almost like they're there.
yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah,
something, again. It's like a personal energies. We all have personal energies that we communicate to one another, and uh, because people are alive in Christ, their personhood doesn't cease when their physical body dies. It is just in God's embrace, and we're a church, of course, that believes in the resurrection, not just of Christ, but of all will be resurrected at the second coming, and so it is a means by which we can continue to relate to someone's personal energies, though their physical presence might not be there. Um,
yeah,
So there are a few unique practices and icons in the Orthodox Church we wanted to ask you about in particular today. One unique thing with the Orthodox tradition, that Eastern Orthodox tradition, is how the denominations got the Russian Orthodox and Greek and Moldovan, I think, is one. There's a few different ones. So how does the art in each different Orthodox Church reflect themselves?
yeah. So there's certain things that will be very similar. Like the Antiochian, the Greek, the really like the Mediterranean Orthodox and Aegean Orthodox traditions. They'll share like a common Byzantine style, a style that was kind of became normative during the height of the Eastern Roman Empire, and centralized in Constantinople, present day Istanbul. And so a lot of them will have very similar artistic expressions. Although we're not in communion with them, the Coptic Church will have something similar, but it'll look more Egyptian. They're like just like kind of the way that they're stylized is, again, it's not like a photographic representation, but you can tell the difference. Like it looks Ethiopian, or looks Coptic, and the Ethiopian church will again do the same thing, but they'll maybe they'll depict Christ with darker skin or something like that, and it'll reflect kind of the expressive art of that culture. The Russian and the Slavic churches in general, some will have a Byzantine style. Others will, some of them were influenced by their connection to the West in the 19th century, 18th century, and so they might have a little bit of a slightly more Western style. It's still stylized, but it's not as stylized as it is you'll find in like Byzantine iconography, where like the features are very elongated. They don't look like human beings look. They're very thin in some areas. Their faces are long. Their mouths are small. Um, it's again like hyper stylized. It'll be slightly less in the Russian church, and then also like architecture as a means of expressive art might be a little different. There's kind of like a standard way of producing an Orthodox church. It's usually a modified basilica, which a basilica is like a narrow rectangular structure where it'll be in cruciform. So there'll be two sides that flare out in the when you're looking at it from above. It'll look like a cross, and there's usually a dome, and in that dome is an icon of Christ, the Pantocrator, the ruler over all. There'll be an apse at the back with the Virgin Mary, like the ladder of Jacob, the midpoint between the heavenly and the earthly spaces. The domes will look different shaped in the Russian Orthodox tradition, in the Slavic tradition, than in the Greek, partly because they needed they did a dome, but they needed something more pitched in a climate that has more snow than Mediterranean climates.
That makes
So
sense.
they have those onion-shaped domes as a practical feature, I would say, because of the need,
Yeah.
just because of the climate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why
I'll
the
say-
Kremlin looks like that, Josh.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so snow doesn't just sit there.
Yeah, I know. I had visited, obviously, I visited Father Jonathan Church, but I went to a Russian Orthodox church once. I want to say that was in the Charlotte area too, but I'm not sure.
There is one here in Charlotte.
Yeah, but it's. I think the architecture stood out, and then the color scheme really stood out to me. Like I don't know how this makes sense, but to me, your church looks more Greek. Like the colors feel more Greek. The Russian church, yeah, I think it's like the red in the Russian church. I'm like, this is very Russian. Yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense. Anyway, another unique image we wanted to mention. You mentioned it earlier, actually. There's the double-headed eagle from the Byzantine kind of connection. There's on some different flags and different, emblems, whatever. Yeah. Also, I know that I think. No, the Greek flag has the blue with the white cross on it, right? Is that
right?
Okay. But back to the double-headed eagle. Do you know what that image represents, or like what that image is about by chance?
Yeah. So the two heads represent the church and the state, and there's usually a crown over the top that both are under the authority of the crown. Sometimes in one of its talons, it has a sword representing kind of the military might of the empire. Sometimes it's a staff representing, again, authority, and is usually holding a globe with a cross over the top to say, like, representing the world under Christ's authority. So it's just kind of representative of a unified, like two heads of authority, the church and the state.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Like, I don't know how to say that. Like some of the other ones, the Anglican flag, I feel like looks very Anglican. Like it looks very English, and I like some of the other flags. But like when I was looking at the ones that has like that eagle image, I'm like, this eagle looks so cool. Like, what is this about?
It's also on the Albanian flag.
Yeah,
like
and
that's their whole
red,
flag.
Yeah. It's red and
That's
black,
cool.
really, really cool.
Yeah.
I'm reminded when I was at seminary, we were considering, like, we didn't really have sports teams. I mean, we used to at the college on the same campus used to like be Division III basketball or something like that. But we were like trying to think of a mascot, and so for the college, it was Hellenic College, so very Greek. So they wanted the owl. But for Holy Cross, we were going to do the Byzantine eagles, and it was like a caricature of a Byzantine eagle with two heads. So
that'd be pretty sick.
That would be cool.
Was a graphic artist, so he made it. It looked terrifying, but really cool at the same time.
Yeah,
I think
an
more important part of a mascot
logo should look terrifying.
Yeah, it needs to be intimidating. That's like the point. You would think.
Yeah,
but one practice for the Greek Orthodox that may be different for some listeners is how you include singing and chants throughout the homily. Can you describe how that's done and why it is that way in your church?
Chanting during the homily, you said?
Yeah, well, not
during
necessarily
the service. I think
during
the
the
service, not the homily.
Service.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, the majority of our church services are made up of, well, there are hymns that will be chanted that are kind of, that rotate We have like every day of the year is dedicated to a different saint or group of saints. So those will change throughout the year, day by day. And then we're on an 8-week cycle of, sorry, my dog just shook her collar. An 8-week cycle of hymns for day to day. And then those are placed within a skeleton structure of a church service, which is constituted by prayers and verses, mostly taken from Scripture, and a lot of. So we'll do like a refrain from the Psalms or the prophets or something like that, followed by a hymn. During the liturgy, like the Eucharistic service that we'll do on a Sunday, again, it'll be those same things, like hymns specific to the feast. It'll be like some of it will be petitions, but the responses are done. They're sung rather than read. And then even our scripture reading, if it's done in a more traditional style, will be chanted. Like we will chant the reading of scripture, just to say that it's not just something regular, that there's something sacred about this. And so we utilize our voices to communicate that. And the hymns are there's different tones, like modes of like keys that we'll chant in. And sometimes we'll be like singing along, and it'll be in like a enharmonic tone, which is very similar to like a regular major scale. But like when we sing about something sad or dark or fearful, we'll switch into a more sharp chromatic tone to accentuate the words of the hymn or of the psalm verse or something like that, as a means of further communicating the significance of the piece.
Yeah.
And it's actually a lot of our theology historically was communicated in the hymnology of the church. So like we say, if you really want to understand the church, just read the hymns, particularly of like the morning service on Sunday. Like everything we believe about the resurrection and life to come, you'll see chanted in the hymns that we do. And like there are hymns that are called like dogmatic hymns, where like it like communicates like a very deep theological concepts, but in music. And some of our hymns, like the Christmas hymns, were just like cut up pieces of an oration of Saint Gregory. Like they just took his words, like this beautiful poetic words of Saint Gregory, and set it to music and it was just like about like this is what we believe about the incarnation. So
yeah, I would love to do an episode about musical intentionality, because it's there.
So we can do that.
Yeah, I have a friend I work with, and he's young because I work at Chipotle. We get a lot of youngins. He was talking about he's taking a music history class for his high school, in high school right now, and it just really annoys him because every day they're talking about like ancient religious music. It's like, yeah, that's most of music history is religious music. That's just the way it is. Are there any like Orthodox specific images or icons that you find special significance in that you could share with us, other than the one you already shared with us?
Yeah. So one's just really cool because it's the most recent addition to our cathedral. So our cathedral is Holy Trinity, and traditionally you do not depict the Trinity like as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You might find ones where there's like two figures, one specifically very much looking like Christ, the other one not looking like Christ, but representing Christ, but like as the Father. It's not an icon of the Father. It's an icon of Christ as the Ancient of Days from Daniel and from the Book of Revelation. But and then the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove. But traditional icons of the Holy Trinity are a depiction of the hospitality of Abraham, the three angels in the Old Testament. And that represents the Holy Trinity. And so as part of our centennial celebration, because we just on the 23rd of September was our 100th year, the day of our 100th anniversary. And as part of that, we made an icon of a Holy Trinity icon. and it's really cool. So above it's the three angels from the hospitality of Abraham, and they're kind of holding uh, the facade of our church building
Oh, that's cool.
as it is
That's
now.
really cool.
And then below that, it's the we used when we first started 100 years ago. We met in the Chamber of Commerce upstairs, and so there's
Oh,
an iconographic depiction of the Chamber of Commerce. And then
wow.
next to that, we had an old Protestant church, Westminster Presbyterian, former Presbyterian church on South Boulevard here in Charlotte, and that's where we were for the mid part of like from the 1920s to the 1950s. And then we purchased the property where we are now, and there's an iconographical depiction of the church facade as it was when it was built in the 50s, and the old Jones Mansion, which is the state
Wow.
on this block where we purchased that we used to meet in before our cultural center was built here. And so it's just
Wow.
like this beautiful history. And like down below, you'll see like people from that era, like kind of sort of depicted. And then in front of one of the churches, the church as it was built in the 50s, there's two children. One's holding an icon of Saint Nectarios and the other's of Saint Luke. And our sister churches, the churches that kind of grew out of our original church, are Saint Nectarios in Matthews. Um, uh, Here in Charlotte, and then St. Luke in Mooresville. And so it's just kind of it tells our whole church, like our particular community story. But we were being held in the embrace of the angels who represent the Trinity.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Man.
That's
Yeah,
really
that's
cool.
so cool.
And that speaks
Yeah.
directly to what we learned earlier in this episode, is that we like to teach history with icons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, are there any images or icons or sculptures from other Christian traditions that you found a special connection with? It's okay to say no. There's not many. I feel like Greek Orthodoxy has like just by far
Yeah.
the most things to look at.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Catholic
certainly
Church.
some like historic, like Western, like Roman religious statues that I think are just really powerful. Like you'll see them in churches. Uh, I think we don't have a tradition of this in Orthodoxy necessarily, but like the Stations of the Cross as a meditative practice that the Catholics use. There's some Western Rite Orthodox, so there's your listeners may or may not know this. So there are Catholics that worship in a Byzantine style. They're called Eastern Rite Catholics, but then there are
Yeah.
also Orthodox people that worship in a Western style called Western Rite Orthodox. In the Western Rite Orthodox, they have a practice of doing the stations as well, but the stations are icons rather than sculptures. But
cool.
in Western churches, in Catholic churches, you'll often find like the Stations of the Cross as statues along the wall. You can walk along and meditate on the steps that Christ took on his way to his passion. And I think it's just like it's a beautiful.
Yeah.
My doctorate's in practical theology, so I study Christian practices,
Yeah.
and so like that is like the fact that particular set of statues has like a practice associated with it. I think is really powerful because it communicates not just by what's depicted, but like how you use it has its own. It communicates its a theology as well, and so I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. I learned earlier that I apparently really appreciate the Anglican emblem, where it's like the compass with the mitre on top, or the mitre, however you say that. Just that the idea of like global outreach being so centered, which is funny from a very English centered church, but you know, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So outside of paintings or statues, usually we do a practical question at the end of like what can engender unity. For this series, we're asking outside of paintings and statues, what's one kind of art that you think people might be able to get into that would help them draw closer to each other and closer to God? Outside of painting, statues,
I think digital media,
podcast.
yeah, podcasts, film. I mean, like film is a medium. Like some of the most powerful like religious expressions I've seen have been through film or television. I mean, whatever your opinion is of like the Chosen, like that as an artistic like the series as film, like as an artistic medium for communicating at least aspects of the gospel, I think it's really powerful. And like you see people that are moved by it across denominations, and some people are moved
Yeah.
like in outrage against it, but at least it's a conversation starter.
Yeah.
And then film in general, like there's been some very powerful movies communicating Orthodox like ascetical like spiritual practices, some from Russia and stuff like that, but they can
Yeah.
watch them dubbed or with subtitles, and it really communicates like our theology and spirituality really well. And I've seen the same thing with Protestant spirituality and practices communicated through mediums of film. And then documentaries as well, like I like a less
Mhm.
like less entertainment value, more kind of educational value, but still, I think it's a really profound, and I think we'll probably
Yeah.
we're already seeing it being used more, and I hope that we continue to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly don't like a lot of Christian movies, but I think it's called Risen, where it was the Roman guard trying to investigate what happened to the body and all this stuff whenever Jesus came back. And there's this like, and I mention this a lot, but there's this one specific image where he sees the disciples together laughing, and there's just this picture of them being joyful to me that just kind of, some images just kind of like get stuck in your head. And for me, that's just that image of them laughing, because it's like, I guess so often, those, I mean, you might not know, but a lot of the churches that I grew up in, they did these like little videos of Jesus and the disciples, and they're always so stoic all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And just to see an image of them laughing just stood out to me so much. And it just, I don't know, it touched my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of modern Christian filmmaking gets really bogged down with trying to be involved in like the culture war and identity
Yeah,
politics, and that makes a
that's
lot of
true.
them borderline unwatchable.
Yeah, just not good.
Yeah, but when it's good, it's good. When we get like the Passion of the Christ or something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean the Passion itself. Like I didn't grow up in the. I don't know if I ever talked about this when like we first. I mean, we've been doing this for like 4.5 years now. I think you're one of the first
Something like that.
conversations I had, and I mean I didn't grow up going to church. I was baptized when I was young because that's what you did. But I didn't like really have a conversion experience until much later. It's when the Passion came out, and like seeing that movie, I'm like, that's what he did in 12 hours. Like, what else did he do? It's like I immediately went out and bought a Bible, and I didn't know where to go from there. And like that's what started me on this journey. Like, I'm sitting here talking to you both today because I saw that movie.
Oh, wow.
Almost 20 years ago. So it's remarkable how something. And I didn't even see it because I had some like faith connection to it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I liked history, so I'm like, oh, I'll go see that movie. It's all in another language. That's even cooler. And then next thing I knew, I'm like studying to be a priest. I was a professor for years of theology, and now I'm the priest at one of the largest parishes in the country. And it's just like, wow.
Oh, man. Yeah, we're going to have to do that episode of, well, yeah, it could be like a crossover with systematic geekology. We're doing our year of origins. We do the origins of Father Jonathan. It'd be fun
Yeah.
episode. Yeah.
So if everyone stopped and took the time to appreciate these like good Christian films, what do you think we would see change in the world? Or if we just made more good Christian films?
Yeah, if we made more good Christian films, that would be a start.
Yeah, so
But I
far
think
it's like
that,
The Passion and Pinocchio.
yeah,
Prison.
I think like one of the things that would probably like I think we've just been conditioned in this age to receive messages better through film.
Mhm.
And so if there were good films available like that were worth seeing, like even like I said, like I didn't go see The Passion as a Christian. I saw it as like for better or for lack of a better term, I was an atheist seeing that movie, but I was still moved to see it, just because of the like how it was, like the interest around it. But like if more people saw it, at least like open up opportunities for conversation, and sometimes it's a striking thing to like to see Christ crucified in film. Like I knew he was crucified, but then like just hit, like everyone knows that Christ was crucified, but like to see like what that could have looked like,
Yeah.
and like I was struck, I was like convicted. I'm like that was my immediate response to it. But it was like I don't think I'm like just a simple piece of art would have done the same thing to me, because I just wasn't conditioned to uh, receive that message in just from like a standard painting or something like that. I grew up in a time when I think everything is communicated through like digital media, through images, through picture, film, like those type of things. So I think it would probably reach more people, particularly if it wasn't like crummy quality or bad writing.
Trying really hard
Yeah.
not to name specific movies that
Yeah, I did want to say
came out of
anything.
Georgia, but I'm gonna give my own really specific answer to this. If specifically a Christian made a movie of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, like the book, the Victor Hugo book, if they were to make that movie and make it the same quality of Les Mis, I think it would force the church to look at themselves in the mirror, and we'd have to come together to fix some things. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we wrap up, we like to ask everyone to share a moment where they saw God recently, whether it be from a blessing, challenge, moment of worship, whatever it may be. I always make Josh go first. So, Josh, do you have a God moment for us this week?
I always have plenty. This time I'm going to go back to doing a Chipotle one. Yeah.
Welcome
Um,
back.
yeah, thanks. This is kind of a challenge, I guess. A guy was brought into our store Monday morning, and I saw him on the schedule as a position that I was hoping to get. And my first thought is, oh man, I can't get this position. This guy is here. And I was immediately upset about it and was like, yeah, I'm not going to say anything. People told me I might get this position, whatever, but I'm going to keep it to myself and just going to be upset for the day and it'll be fine. And then as soon as I meet the guy, and this is where the challenge comes in, the first thing he says is, oh, you're Joshua Noel. I'm here to train you for this position. I was like, oh,
Cool.
yeah, I glad I didn't say anything. Kind of challenge that I got upset a little too early. So yeah, challenge and a blessing. There we go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
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 I'm also in my own little challenge, Chipotle challenge right now. Our general manager is on vacation, and I have by far the most experience in the store now. So now everyone thinks I'm the general manager. It's like, no, I don't even make $16 an hour. Go talk to someone else. This is I'm intentionally getting paid too little to deal with this question.
Yeah. Because you could have moved up. You could be in the position that I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't want to work at night.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, but for real, I have a friend, an actual God moment. I have a friend that I haven't seen in a very long time, because he's got a bunch of stuff going on, and he just kind of showed up the other day, and it's my roommate. He showed up the other day, and we got to talk about it, and some things happened a couple months ago, and we have cats. Their litter box is in his closet. Somehow his closet door got closed, and so they needed a place to go, and they chose his bed, which had like all of his clothes on it. Yeah. So that was rough. And then the next time when he came back after that and found that out, that same night his partner got in a horrible car accident. So then he's mostly been taking care of her, not here. So I did his laundry while he was gone, cuz you shouldn't have to deal with that, and
Yeah.
traumatic brain injury partner at the same time. So I just did his laundry for him and put it back on the clean bed. And when he came back, he didn't realize that they were clean. He thought that somebody had just taken all of the clothes that were covered in cat waste and put them back on the bed.
Oh,
So, communicate to people. Don't if you're trying to surprise somebody, communicate that you've done something for them, because a lot of times people won't realize it.
yeah.
That can lead to negative
That's a good one.
effects.
I feel like both of our God moments had a lot of strong literary irony to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't find that out until this last time that he came, by the way. This happened like months ago.
Great.
Yeah. So, Father Jonathan, God moment.
Yeah. So it was a series of events. So I got a text message from a parishioner that's connected with our church, but primarily goes to the other church in town. And it was like a group text between me and the head priest at the other church to see who was able to. The woman is from Spartanburg, like an hour and a half away, I guess.
Spartanburg mentioned. Let's go.
And a parishioner that she knows from there is in the hospital here awaiting a transplant. And that she asked if it was possible for me or Father Andreas, the priest at St. Nectarios, to go. And both of us were unable to, but Father Christian, my assistant, was available to go, and he went. Unfortunately, the person was intubated and not and sedated. So he went and spoke with the wife and the mother of the person, but wasn't able to do much for the person, like communicate with them directly. And then yesterday morning, they were talking, or early afternoon, they were talking. When he came out, the intubation was taken out, and he was talking with his wife, and she mentioned that Father came by, and the nurse overheard it and asked if they were Catholic, because that's the assumption. But they said, "Oh no, we're Greek Orthodox," and the nurse happens to be a parishioner here at the cathedral.
Wow.
And she asked if it was all right if she contacts me to come, so that he can. So I was able to go see him, and I prayed with him, and he received communion and all of that. And I was talking with him a little bit, and his wife happens to be Palestinian, and we weren't talking about any of the circumstances over there right now. But I said, "Oh, I was the best man in a wedding in Palestine."
Wow.
And the bride of my very good friend is from a village just outside of Bethlehem called Bechala. And she said, "That's where my dad's from." And so this
Crazy.
so there is this connection. I was asked to go see a person, unable to go. My assistant went, but he was not able to he wasn't awake when he was there. And then one of my parishioners happened to be his nurse, and I was able to get there when he was awake. And I happened to have spent 3 weeks in the village where this woman's father is from. And then this morning she called again, and I went to go see him again because he's going in for surgery today. Not for the heart transplant, but for just kind of a surgery to help sustain him until he's able to receive a transplant. But like these series of like coincidental events, and I think it's in coincidence. I told her it's not coincidence, it's providence. Providence is kind of God we're on a conveyor belt leading us towards God, and these moments of clarity allow us to realize just how he is pulling us towards himself. And so that was my moment of recognizing God's actions in the midst of the world.
That's pretty cool.
And I'm from Spartanburg.
I like those moments. That's also a connection, but not as unique. Well,
just
a tiny town outside of Bethlehem. I think so specific.
That's actually a really good that just goes to show you everything is connected. My whole weekend has been leading up to this moment. So.
Yeah.
We did get the rights to "It's a Small World" for the outro, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Cost us $6 million.
Yeah. No biggie.
That's amazing, though. That's crazy to hear.
That is, yeah.
I was just hanging
Man.
out with one of my only Palestinian friend a couple days ago, before all this news started flowing out.
That's also cool.
But
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with a friend, share it with an enemy, share it with your cousins, and there are paid subscriptions you can use to support us on Captivate, Apple Podcasts, and Patreon for extra content. You can support us. You can also support us for free by liking. If you're on YouTube, subscribe it, share it, just talk about it sometimes. It'd be really helpful. I'd appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. Go to
Pretty
Shopify,
pleased.
print out the largest sized poster they have, put it in your workplace over the office door. That kind of thing. It's just casual stuff, Yeah.
Whole church vandalism.
Also, check out the other shows on the Anazal Ministry Podcast Network, AMP Network. We have the homily with Pastor Chill Will from Chapel Hill. I do Dummy for Theology over there. Eventually, TJ's going to have a hockey show. Other friend of the show, Christian Ashley, he has a show over there, Let Nothing Move You. All kinds of stuff. Check it out. TJ and I both do systematic ecology. Father Jonathan guested over there once and talked about D&D. So if you want to hear him talk about D&D, you got to go over there.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed it. Come back next week. We'll be continuing the Ecumenical Aesthetic series with Pastor Joe Day about his experience with art in the church as he's worked both in and out of home churches. After this, we'll conclude the series with Professor Chris Moreland of the Catholic tradition to discuss the use of statues and other imagery in their church. And finally, that series is going to end. I feel like we've been doing this for 7 years. It's mostly because of Exodus 35.
That's a long
Yeah,
verse,
it's long. But at the end of season 1, Francis Chan will be joining us, hopefully.
Yeah, he doesn't know, though. And we're going to have him read Exodus 35.
Yeah. He's going to suffer.
Someone's got to tell him, though. Well, don't tell him that part.
Yeah, no, he's going to have a great time, and we're not going to make him read Exodus 35, 10 through 19.
All right. See you guys.